GamingBolt presents 15 things you need to know before you buy EA Sports UFC 3. EA Sports' UFC franchise is relatively new in the sports simulation genre, but there's no denying that it has a lot of promise. The second game was significantly better than the series' debut, and similarly, it looks like UFC 3 will also be making some major improvements. Here in this feature, we're going to look at 15 of the most important pieces of information you need to know about the upcoming fighter. New mechanics. One of the biggest changes that EA Sports is making with UFC 3 comes in the form of new striking mechanics. In UFC 3, strikes will be much more accurate and, as a result, much more technical. Players will be able to move in any direction while striking, so throwing an uppercut while moving forward is going to now be possible, just as one example. Getting in clean shots will clearly be harder thanks to this newer, much more technical system, but patient players will be rewarded, since clean strikes will send your opponents into the rocked state much more often than before. Additionally, UFC 3 will also have an analog stick dedicated completely to movement for your head and your shoulders. It definitely looks like the game is moving away from the button mashing territory, and that definitely sounds like something to be excited about. Overhauled animations. Another way that UFC 3 will be upping the authenticity of its fighter is through its animations. This year's iteration will be making use of a motion capture technology known as Real Player Motion Tech that will supposedly contribute significantly to how your fighters move and fight. EA Sports claims to have captured over 5,000 animations, and we're hoping that this will make an actual difference not only in how the game looks in action, but also how it plays. Grappling remains unchanged. One of the things that people often complained about in UFC and UFC 2 is the grappling mechanics, and even though the system was improved a bit in the second game, there's still a lot that needs fixing. The main issue seems to be that it feels like a minigame more than anything else, and ends up feeling like it's less about skill than it should be. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like UFC 3 will be fixing that. Guess we're going to have to wait until next year. Improved presentation. Presentation is an important part of any sports simulation game, especially one focused on the UFC. And it also seems to be an area where EA Sports never fails to impress, so it comes as no surprise that it's going to be a major focus once again in the UFC 3. It looks like the game is going to try and perfectly recreate the feel, look, and sound of UFC fights, from the crowds to fighters themselves. Speaking of the fighters, it looks like EA Sports is spending a great deal of time on making sure they recreate their mannerisms as accurately as they can, so that's good news for UFC fans. Character roster. Having a large, varied roster of fighters to choose from is extremely important in a game such as UFC, and it looks like EA Sports are pulling no punches in this area. It's been confirmed that UFC 3 will have the largest roster in the series' history. As of now, there are over 100 fighters confirmed for the game, around a dozen of which are newcomers. And this isn't even the full list. There might be more in there that we don't even know of yet. Tournament mode. One of the many new additions EA Sports are cramming into UFC 3 is the new tournament mode. The tournament mode will allow players to fight against as many opponents as possible in bracket-style elimination rounds. What's more, these fights will feature continuous damage and fatigue, which should add an extra layer of adrenaline and tension to the whole affair. If it's as much fun as it sounds, it might just prove to be a massive time sink for many of those who purchased the game. New multiplayer modes. The tournament mode isn't the only new addition, though. UFC 3 will be building on the knockout mode introduced in its predecessor and deliver a number of new multiplayer modes designed specially for that mode, in order to allow the players to take part in quick and fast bouts against online opponents. Some of these are the stand and bang mode and the submission showdown mode. In addition to that, players will also be able to customize and create their own matches with their own sets of rules. GOAT Career Mode. The tournament mode and new multiplayer modes might be major new additions, but the biggest addition in UFC 3 has to be the new career mode. The GOAT Career Mode will see players creating their own fighter and embarking on the path to become the greatest fighter of all time, as the name suggests. Based on everything that we've heard and seen so far, it definitely seems to be the headline addition in this year's game. Player choice. One of the things that makes the new career mode such an exciting prospect is that it will place a major emphasis on player choice and agency. The choices you make while playing the game will have an actual impact on how your career progresses and what happens with your characters. what rivalries and friendships you form, how well you are liked by the audiences, and how large of a following you have are just a few of the things that will be shaped by what you do within the career mode. Define your own personality. This, of course, is something that goes hand in hand with player choice. UFC 3's career mode will let you build your own fighter, but the game will also allow you to truly make them your own character. You'll be able to determine what kind of personality your fighter should have, via things such as interviews and press interactions, among other things. Whether you want to be the calm, collected type who does their talking in the ring, or the fiery kind of fighter who likes to trash talk, you'll be able to shape your character as you see fit. Outside of the fights. Thanks to the fact that player choice is such a huge part of this year's career mode in UFC 3, you'll be quite invested in the occurrences outside of fights as well. The fights will obviously still be the main attraction, but it looks like there's going to be a lot more to the career mode. Players will be able to make use of their actions outside of fights to do all sorts of things, such as making promotional choices, making extra money by signing contracts, building hype before fights, and gaining fans. In-game social media mechanics. There will also be an in-game social media mechanic that will tie into how you define your character's personality. Players will be able to use this mechanic to create and build up rivalries with other UFC stars, and this mechanic will also be integral to building the kind of persona you want your character to have. It remains to be seen just how much of an effect this will have on the events in the career mode, but it definitely sounds like an interesting feature. Microtransactions. Ultimate Team will be making a comeback in UFC 3, so yeah, it's going to have microtransactions. There have been some criticism for this in the weeks building up to the game's launch, but it should be noted that the microtransactions are limited to Ultimate Team, and they seem to function as they always have in UFC and FIFA. Frame rate. UFC 3 will be running at a frame rate of 30 frames per second on the Xbox One and PS4, but if you have the upgraded versions of the systems, you'll be at an advantage. On the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro, the game will run at a frame rate of 60 frames per second, which is a little weird because this means that online play might just see you coming up against players who are playing the game at a lower or higher frame rate. On the One X or the Pro, you will also have the option of having the game rendered at a higher resolution, but the trade-off for that will be the frame rate dropping to 30 frames per second. Champions Edition. When UFC 3 launches on February 2nd for the Xbox One and PS4, players will also have the option of purchasing the game's Champions Edition. The Champions Edition will include the game itself, a choice of one current or former UFC champion in Ultimate Team, 20 premium packs in Ultimate Team over the course of 10 weeks, 500 UFC points, as well as 5 premium packs which you will receive instantly. And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.